Ein Yaakov, the stories from the Talmud. We have today on the menu, we have a couple different topics, a couple different sayings, and as usual, many life lessons that we can take home. So, this is the Maseches Brachot of blessings. So the topic of the whole book is about different blessings, and at the end we're very close by the end. We only have two left, one or two Mishnayot left, so we're pretty close to the end of the whole book. So the Mishnah tells us that one is allowed to greet someone else with God's name. This is not something that's really practiced today. We say Shalom Aleichem. The word Shalom is one of God's names. So in essence, we are using one of God's names when we say Shalom Aleichem, peace upon you, because one of God's names is peace. But back in the day, there was a time that people used to actually greet with God's actual name, with saying the name of God.
It was
the way we say it by davening, not with the way we're not allowed to say it ever, only in the high priest, not that one. But just saying when we say it the way we say it in prayers, it was allowed to be a way to greet, and you should say God should be with you, and using God's name. And the Mishnah tells us a few proofs, and this is actually the very last Mishnah. The entire Masechet ends up with this. You're allowed to greet someone else with the name of Hashem, and we bring a few proofs. Proof number one was from the Shofet. He was a judge, one of the period of the judges, and the Shofet, his name was Boaz, or the way he's written, called Ivtzan, another name of him for him. And it says he was coming to the people that were cutting the wheat. This is in the story of Rus. There was a group of people that were cutting the wheat, and he says, "Vayomer lekaitzrim," and he says to the people that were cutting, shearing the wheat, he says, "Hashem imachem," God is with you. He says Hashem's name. We see he used the name of God. Now you might say, maybe that was just a unique thing. Maybe he did it from himself. Maybe it's not halacha. Maybe you're not allowed to. Only he was allowed to do it. So we bring another proof, and this proof comes from a different judge, different shofet. His name was Gidon. It's an English name. Gidon has
Gideon.
Gideon. And Gideon, when he was being appointed to be the judge of the Jewish people, so an angel of God came to him, and he greeted him and said, "Hashem imcha, gibar hachayil." He said, God is with you. So again, we see a greeting. Now, Gideon did not know at that time that was an angel. It looked like a regular person, and he greeted him, and he used God's name. Now, the Gemara wants to know, why do we need to have both proofs? And the Gemara explains, because if it would be just Boaz, you would say maybe he acted on his own. If it would be just Gideon, maybe that was an angel, and that's different. Maybe he was giving him a blessing from God. So we have both proofs. But where does it come from? Where does this idea come from that you could say God's name when you're greeting someone if it's against the law? The Torah says you're not allowed to say God's name in vain. Right?
What about when you sneeze and somebody says, "God bless you"?
So that's actually a very good question. Saying the word name, God's name, in vain applies, by the way, also in English. You shouldn't say the word God even for nothing. However, if you're saying it in a context, for example, right now we're talking about it, we're saying you're not allowed to say God's name, so it's in a context. So then you're allowed to. If someone asks you how you're doing, you say thank God, perfectly fine. But to say God's name for just because of nothing, like some people, they fall, and, or something bad happens, they say, "Oh my," and instead of saying, "Oh my goodness," or "my gosh," they say with God, that's a problem. the Rebbe actually gave what was she blocking? The Rebbe actually gave a directive that even in writing, one shouldn't write out. No, you're blocking him now.
Perfect.
You shouldn't write out God because there's holiness. Even in English, God has certain holiness to it. So the way you all Chabad and a lot of people write is write G/D. So just using the name of God for no good reason is a problem, even in English. There's a famous Russian song that's sung in Chabad. It goes Niet Niet Nikavo Kromyevo Adnava, which means there's nobody besides God. The original song is Kromya Boga Adnava, which means besides God there is no one. The Rebbe said when you're singing the song to switch it to Krom Yevo. Yevo means him, right? You know, him. So besides him, there's no one. It's the same idea, but since you're going to be repeating it again and again in a song, better not to say God's name. But if you're talking about it, it's okay. So where does it come from, this idea back then that it's okay to greet someone else using God's name? God's name in vain shouldn't be just thrown around.
In the Torah, they did it.
In the biblical times, they did it.
What is the name that the high priest?
I don't know. You asked me that one. I don't know.
You don't know.
If I would know, I wouldn't tell you.
Yeah, because we don't like you.
No, because I don't want you to build a golem.
Yeah.
Whenever Abraham spoke to people,
So you know
people say
something.
Hashem's name.
Do I look like a man that would build a golem?
Yes.
Okay, so
Chorus.
now here we're going to introduce now a verse, which we're going to talk about this verse for a while. And the verse goes as follows. This is in chapter 119 in Tehillim 12. It says, Eis la'asois lahashem hefeiru teirasecha. Translated, there is a time to do for God. Hefeiru teirasecha. They will go against your Torah. What does it mean? What's the meaning of this verse? There is sometimes that there is room in order to do something for God. If you're going to be doing something called a Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, there might be room. I want to give a disclaimer. We don't know. These days we are not authorized to make this decision by ourselves. The Gemara tells us about this decision. There might be room to go Hefeiru Teresecha. There might be room to transgress and go against God's word in order to do for God. There's sometimes this ability to be able to do something for God on the account of going against the Torah, transgressing the Torah.
Can you give an example?
Oh, yeah, here's an example.
Oh, the Rabbanim?
We'll talk about it. We'll give a few examples. So here's the example that we're using in this context is you're saying God's name to someone else, which is not allowed. Transgressing, right? Not really transgressing, but kind of going against God's word. But it's in order, Eisla Hashem, you are greeting someone else. You are sanctifying God's name. You are giving another Jew a blessing, which is an extremely powerful thing. So this is an area where we see that you're going kind of against the Torah in order to do it for the sake of Hashem. Another example. There's a famous story mentioned in the prophets of Elijah the prophet. In his time, the Jews were unfortunately very deep into doing idol worshipping, and they were worshipping the idol of Baal. And they were very into it, and the situation was so bad that almost everybody had these idols in their house, even the religious Jews, and it was very, very bad. And Elijah the prophet challenged the so-called prophets of Baal for a test. Let's do it once and for all. We'll do a test to see who's right.
The fire test.
The fire test, yeah. So they gathered all the Jews around Mount Carmel in Jerusalem, in Israel, and all the Jews gathered around, and he told the prophets of Baal, "You're going to build an altar, and I'll build an altar. You bring a cow, and I'll bring a cow. You'll slaughter it, I'll slaughter it, and we'll see where the fire comes down, which one God's going to consume. That's a famous story. Familiar with it?
Yeah.
So he says, you guys are more, I'm just one. Yeah, 250 prophets of Baal. Elijah says, I'm just one, you guys 250, you're the majority. You go first.
Democracy in action.
What?
Democracy in action.
Yeah. So they went first, and they prepared their altar, they slaughtered their cow, and they actually had hired someone inside to try to light the match from underground, but God sent a snake to kill that guy, and they start praying to their gods, and they're going on, and no one's answering. Elijah started teasing them. Maybe you got to go a little louder. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's on vacation. And then basically they realized that they stuck. Now it's his turn. He goes and he says, okay, pour water. And they start bringing buckets of water, till the whole place was overflowed. He built trenches around. The whole place was covered with water. And he says, okay, takes his cow, he slaughters it for the sake of God, puts it onto the altar, he prays to God, and he says, Aneni Hashem, Aneni, God answer me. And a fire comes down, and everyone sees the fire, licks up all the water, the cow, everything is consumed. And everyone calls out, Hashem Elokim, God is God. Okay? So this is a beautiful story. There's one problem with this story. This story happened once the temple was already built in Jerusalem. And the law is that you're not allowed to build an altar outside of the holy temple. And you're not allowed to bring sacrifices to God outside the temple. How is Elijah allowed to do that? This was a kind of a sin, but it was done for the sake of God. Now, a prophet is able to make that, has the authority to make that decision. It's called Hira'as Shah, a temporary lesson. And he's allowed to. He's authorized. It has to be for a good cause. If a prophet comes and says, I am deleting a commandment from God, from now on you're allowed to do idol worship, or from now on this mitzvah you don't do, you're not allowed to listen to him. And that prophet gets killed. So a prophet's not allowed to take out a mitzvah, but in a temporary way he's allowed to. So here we see again, he was allowed to do this as a temporary thing. We mentioned before Gideon. Gideon also was given a test by God. His father himself, Gideon's father himself, was an idol worshiper. These guys had in their backyard a cow that they were feeding this cow for 7 years. So this cow should be a really big cow. So when they're going to sacrifice this cow for Baal, it's going to be a very good sacrifice.
Is it like these guys in Jerusalem who, brought these red cows, in order to sacrifice them? There was this group, like a fringe group. They bought several red cows from Texas.
The heifers, right?
Mailed it. Yeah, and they mailed these red cows to Israel, and they're preparing to sacrifice them.
But there's
So
no
they're
temple.
Right, no, so they're preparing.
There
but
was
they're
an
not.
article today. I think I have it on my phone.
But it didn't have a moon. It has to have no moon. There's
Right,
a
you're
lot
talking
of,
about the red heifer.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a separate thing. They're hoping the Mashiach comes, and they want to be able to offer this their cow.
You got it, Glenn?
So they're not actually sacrificing
You
it.
got the red heifers, Glenn?
No, but it is my pressure.
Okay, anyways, so this Gideon was told by God, actually the first night of him being appointed as judge, and God gave him a very hard assignment. And he tells him, I want you to go right now and go to your house, in your backyard. You have that cow. This was the townspeople's cow, meaning everybody in town was eagerly waiting for the time that they're going to sacrifice this cow for Baal, for their idol. And for 7 years they're feeding it and taking care of it. This was like the cow of the city.
Wagyu beef.
Yeah, and he tells Gideon, go, and I want you to go. There's also a huge tree that they worshipped. I want you to go chop down that tree, use the wood on the altar, and take an altar, and sacrifice that cow for the sake of God. And burn and destroy everything. Burn it, kill it, everything. Kill the cow and burn everything. This was tremendous sacrifice it took from him, and he did it.
That's the all-night korban? It burns all night?
No, it wasn't a korban. It was just like for a test for him.
got the-
It was done privately. So he got a couple of guys to help him do it. But it was done privately. This was his assignment. God wanted to test his guts to see if he had the courage to lead the Jewish people, and he passed the test. But again, this was so many things were not against the law. You're not allowed to have any benefit from anything to do with idol worship. You're not allowed to use a tree for an idol for God's sacrifice. But here, God was making these exceptions for him. So this we see again, in order to sanctify God's name, we're sometimes allowed to transgress God's words. Rabbi says that this same verse that we're talking about, which is again, Eis la'asis la'Hashem, a time to do for God, transgressing the Torah, you could also translate this verse a different way. He says, Eis la'asis la'Hashem. Sometimes God has a time that he does things. What does it mean? When you have sometimes Hefeiru Teresecha, you have people that transgress God's words, people that sin, you have people that deserve punishment, and then you look at them and you see them prospering, and you see them having a good life, and you look at them and you say, what's going on? Why are these guys having a good time? Look what they're doing. They're angering God. And the verse tells us, Eis la'asis la'Hashem. God has a time for them. God has a plan. They're going to get what's coming for them. Don't judge based on what's happening right now. Trust God that he knows the Eis la'asis. He knows when he's going to do it.
Jealous.
You can be jealous, but you have to know. You know, in Chassidus talks a lot.
Are you jealous?
Oh, we were speaking about this before the
I'm a
class.
very jealous person.
We were speaking about this before the class today. People that different methods how to get money from the government, either by crying, discrimination, minority, we're losers, everyone's harassing
Well, we're
us.
Jews. We're already
Everyone,
minority. There's only
and
60
everybody
million
hates
of us.
us. Please help us. Give us some attention. Make a law, anti-Semitism. Make a law about this. Make a Israel Day. Make a this day. Make an anti-Semitic. All these things. That's one method to go about. Or we
That's
go
how you
proud.
make a lot of enemies, Rabbi.
Or we go as proud Jews. We're not minority. We're popularity. We run the world. We run all the banks.
We're all
We,
Congress.
whatever they say about us. Yes, take it all out. Yes,
One of
we
us is
run the
worth
world.
$1 million.
We're with it's a
Rabbi,
different.
is it true that I own the
method.
media?
Well, I do. What do you do? I do.
I do.
You work for me. So it's a different approach. So don't be jealous of them. So Chassidus says there's a way how the non-Jews get their nourishment in these days. It's called from klipa, from the backside. God, when He created the world, He created good and He created bad. Now, why did He create bad? Because He wants us to have a challenge. So you have to create whatever you create in good, you have to create in the contrapart. You have to make the other. It's called the sitra achra, in the opposite. In the language of Kabbalah, it's called sitra achra, the other side.
Yeah.
So whatever he made has a zeh lu'uma zeh. Everything has the other side, the opposite of it.
And the klipa.
Okay, so now he had to give sustenance to the other side. Now, where did the other side get their sustenance from? So in the language of Kabbalah, it's called mibchinas achurayim, from behind. Which means just like when a king is giving something, he could give it with his hand. It's called panim, graciously. Or if someone's begging him for money and he doesn't really want to give him, but he has no choice, he's like, okay, go take it. Throws it behind his shoulder. So that's how God gives his energy to the other side. Now, the other side, in truth, actually gets more. They get more. Because they get without limits. When you're throwing behind your back, you don't look what you're giving or how much you're giving. So God gives them and they get a lot. But it's not coming with God's grace. And God doesn't want it.
Oh,
He's
that's
just
why they
there.
eat the non-kosher
That's why
foods.
they get more. Sometimes they get more money and they get more. When a Jew acts like them and a Jew starts following their ways, he also gets from that same pile. And that's why sometimes they could be very successful. God's not happy, and there's going to come a point when God's going to. We don't like speaking about it, but there's a judgment, and eventually the scores are going to be even. But looking at it now and saying, "Oh, I'm jealous," that's not the right approach. Not the right approach, because that's the way God set it up. They're supposed to have more, and you're supposed to look and be happy with the little bit that you got because it's coming from the front of God, coming with God's grace. You earned it. You deserved it. Okay, and that's a side topic. So, yeah.
There was an article today in World Israel News
Right.
about the building of the Torah.
About the...
Building of the Torah Temple. By Samigdash.
There's an article about it?
Yeah.
I think that somebody resurfaced a video from Trump's first term where some guy said that he's going to build it. It's some old video.
In 2018, Pete Hexet, Donald Trump's choice for Secretary of Defense, shared his thoughts on the building of the
But from what year is it?
temple in Jerusalem.
What year is it?
That's now? That's today's news? Yesterday's news?
I think it resurfaced. I think it's old news from a long time ago.
2018.
Oh, yeah. From last
Well,
time.
you know, Trump did.
But
build
these
a
days,
wall.
everything gets recycled.
No,
So.
you have to remember, Trump did build a wall.
Wait till
So he
AI
started-
But
kicks
listen,
in.
but that people talking about this, right?
Right. Okay, it's good. The fact that people are talking about it's good.
Trump is going to build a huge mechitza, and the modern Orthodox are going to pay for it.
Okay. So now we have some more sayings that we're going to be using the same verse, different sayings about it. Hillel Azakin
Don't
said,
speak
Hillel
about other things.
Hillel the elder said, Bishas hamechkansim pazer, which means in a time when all the scholars are gathering themselves together and they're not teaching others, this is a lesson, a message for the other scholars, pazer, which means disperse, give out, spread out, disperse what you have. If you have stuff to share it. If no one else is sharing, you should share what you know. If everyone else is sharing, then you could focus on gather in, which means focus on learning and advancing more for yourself. If you see a generation that loves the Torah, pazer, then you should disperse what you have. If people are ready to come to your class, you got to teach. Right? It's a message. And if you know something, you have to teach it. If you're going to see a generation where people are not interested in learning and they mock the Torah, they don't respect it, so then don't disperse it to them if it's going to be wasted. Make sure it gets to them. This is
Shouldn't
actually
we, teach
this approach.
Everybody who
This
wants to come and learn?
Right. So this approach, this concept, is actually a different take on it. When actually came the time of spreading Chassidus. Chassidus is the secrets of Torah, the inner meanings of Torah. So the inner secrets of Torah originally began to be exposed in the time of the Zohar, time of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But he taught it to a group of people, and they wrote a book called the Zohar, but it wasn't popular. It was passed down from generation to generation, and select people learned from it.
I heard it was lost and then found.
Until it came, I don't know if it was actually lost. What?
I don't know.
Until it came the time of the Arizal. The Arizal, he studied the Zohar and he taught it, and he had many students, and he opened up like a Kabbalah. He was like the first Kabbalah center, and he had great students studying in Tzfas, and that opened up the gate, kind of opened the gates for learning this Zohar. And the Arizal said, now it's time to be spread out, but still, it was very, very limited, even after his times. There was like a few schools of learning Kabbalah from generation to generation. When it came to the time of the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov decided that it's time to spread. Now, he didn't decide on his own. He actually says he ascended to heaven, and he met Mashiach. He went into the chamber of Mashiach, and he said, Imasai ka'asimar, when will my master come? He asked Mashiach, when are you going to come? And Mashiach said, when your well springs are going to be spread out and dispersed, Mashiach's going to come. And he made it his mission to spread. His students continued the spreading, and some of them were spreading it a lot. But these were very big secrets. And the Baal Shem Tov student, known as the Mezutra Magid of Dovber, he was very into spreading it out. And he had a student, or a colleague, his name was Pinchas Karetz. He was once walking with the Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya, which were both students of this Magid. And he noticed a page or a booklet, a pamphlet of Chassidus, of these secrets, on the floor. Different versions under somebody was sitting on it. There's different versions of it. But he basically saw it in a disgraceful way. And when he saw this, he was so upset. How could something so holy, so precious, be trampled upon? He was so upset. And being such a great and tremendous Torah giant as he was, his anger that he had actually caused in heaven something called a kapeda, like a heavenly judgment, to go against his own teacher and master, the Maggid, because it was kind of his fault, because he was spreading it out, and because of that, it landed up on the floor. And the Maggid was actually in danger of dying from this heavenly judgment against him.
Because of his anger?
Because of that great person that saw his anger. Yeah. These great rabbis, you got to be careful. You have to get them upset.
But maybe he had the Torah, it was just spread all over the place, that's how he lived, it was okay.
That's the problem.
So that's the problem. So now, the
was
story's
his
not
life,
over.
it was
The story's not over.
It's everywhere.
The story's not over. The Alter Rebbe, which at that time was a young man, he saw that his colleague was very upset, and he wanted to calm him down. And he told his colleague, I'm going to tell you a parable, a mashal, analogy, to explain the fact that this is on the floor. What's the analogy? And he says the following story. There was once a king, like all analogies start with a king. Metaphor. There was once a king that had a son. It was very dear to him, very precious to him. And the king was ready to give everything for his son. And his son grew older, and then one day became very sick. So obviously the king's son is all the doctors, the best doctors in the world, and everyone's coming trying to treat the king's son to no avail. Like they couldn't cure him. The best doctors were trying to cure him, they couldn't.
He was a boy. How old was he?
A boy. It's a metaphor. Details not important. And some details are not important. But some details are. So the king finally comes along one doctor, and he says he has the cure. He needs medicine that's going to have a certain mineral crushed into liquid, and if this boy is going to drink from this liquid, from this mineral, he's going to get better. Okay, good. Where do we get this mineral? The doctor says there's one problem. And I'm not sure you're going to agree. No expense, any price. I'm ready to pay whatever it is. He says, King, you don't understand. This mineral is in a diamond. Okay, fine. So we'll get a diamond. I don't care. Again, money is not an expense. I don't care. I'm ready to give whatever it takes. He says, no. This diamond, there's only one diamond in the whole world. Okay, so let's get it. It's in your crown. The center of the king's crown. The main jewel of the king's crown. The crown jewel. The mineral's in there. And the only way to get your son better, is if we take that diamond, we smash it, and we mix the powder into the liquid. And the king says, I'm ready. No, for sure. Your crown, you sure? Yeah, of course. He says, there's a problem. Your son is so unwell that we're not even sure if he's able to drink. So we're not sure if the liquid's going to be able to get in. So the king said, what's the problem? You take it, you smash it up, and you pour it all over his face, and you hope that maybe a little bit's going to go in. And the Alter Rebbe tells his colleague that the Jewish nation has fallen so low, and we are the king's only son. And the time has come, the only way to revive the Jewish nation from our low spiritual level, our low spiritual state, is if we take the crown jewel, God's holiest secrets of the Torah, Chassidut, and we take this, and we have to just spread it out so much, maybe a little bit will go into one Jew's heart, and that will be able to turn him on and ignite his soul to bring it back to his Father in heaven. And that this story calmed him down, and it took away that heavenly judgment against his teacher. So this story is very different than the Gemara. Because the Gemara over here says, if you see a generation that's not worthy, don't teach. Don't spread it out. But I guess now we're living in a different time. Because now the Rebbe teaches us that we have to spread out Chassidus. That's why the Rebbe sent out emissaries to all corners of the world. You have Chabad houses everywhere. And the mission is to reach every single Jew. And yeah, some of it goes to waste. So many times you go on King's Highway and you see the pamphlets that were given out by the guys on the street, and you see a message on the floor, and every shul gives out papers about different Torah thoughts and the parsha, and a lot of them get trampled upon, and we have to keep it with respect. This is very holy things. But we did enter a time now where we have to spread out the wellspring so much, because we have to reach every single person. Okay, let's move on.
So does this mean that every secret is going to get exposed, or just,
So some secrets are only going to be revealed when Mashiach comes, but we get now a taste. So learning Chassidus now is a taste of the secrets we're going to get when Mashiach comes. Okay.
Will I be meeting the Mashiach?
For sure.
Rabbi, what kind of secrets are we talking about?
Meanings of Torah, the accomplishments of mitzvahs.
Is it like those, is it like that book you gave me, Ketorah's Human?
Yeah. That's some parts of Chassidus. Sometimes you do a mitzvah, and you don't know what you're doing when you do that mitzvah. Imagine you found out what you accomplished.
I can be doing a mitzvah and I'll have
Imagine
no
you
clue
found
what
out
I'm doing.
What you accomplished. They make sometimes these video shows, social media. So they do these like experiments. And imagine you see a guy in the street, and you just, something inside of you told you, help him out. And you threw him $1. And you walked away. You have no idea what you accomplished, right? Now, imagine you find out afterward that guy was about to commit suicide. He completely gave up hope. And he's like, God, send me a sign that somebody cares for me, someone loves me. And then, just that second, you came by and threw him $1. And you gave him another chance of life. Now, would you be, if this story happened, and you heard about it, how would that make you feel?
I wouldn't believe it, because you always have these kinds of stories. You always have these kinds of stories in the Jewish press and whatnot, all these make-believe stories,
Okay, but if you found out that it was true, it make you feel good. Mashiach comes, we're going to find out every single mitzvah, what it accomplished, and what it did, what effect it has. So that's some of the secrets. That's some of the secrets we're going to find out, Mashiach.
So it's called Nigla?
Everything's going to be revealed. So, yeah, Nigla means revealed.
So,
yeah.
Since my time is very short in this world, how am I going to meet Mashiach?
Mashiach is coming right now.
Yes,
You told me that when you came in, you remember?
Yeah, I saw the car with the emblem.
Exactly. So
but he's not here. He
coming.
just parks here.
No, he's
and
here.
goes
We
to
just
the
gotta
good
reveal
people.
No, he's coming. Mashiach is coming.
No, you have to say he's here.
He said this crew,
It says the 13, the Rambam Maimonides says there's 13 principles of the Jewish faith. Principle number 12 is Ani Ma'amin, I believe, be'emuna shlema, with complete emuna, complete belief, be'vias HaMashiach, with the coming of Mashiach. And even though he may tarry, even though he might take his time, im kol zeh, with this wait for him, is coming every single day. Every day we have to wait to come.
But on the day it just so happens he came.
And the Rebbe says kol hayom, the whole day we have to wait.
Rabbi, what about the story that Mashiach actually came, and he goes to the Satmar, and the Satmar say,
that's a joke.
You're not wearing black, so you're not one of us. You can't be Mashiach.
Okay.
And he goes to all these groups, and they tell him, because you're not a certain kind, you don't wear certain clothing, you don't behave a certain way, you can't be Mashiach. So Mashiach goes back to heaven and says, they're not ready yet.
Okay, that's a joke. It's not a true story. Rabbi Kapara says as follows: Zalt, this is Aramaic for when it becomes cheap, when merchandise is cheap. Kifoitz, go jump, rush. Kinei mina, and go buy from it. When merchandise is cheap, you should go invest, right?
Right.
So, what's this a metaphor? This merchandise that we're talking about is Torah. When Torah is cheap, which means when Torah is not such appreciated, you should go and get it. Go acquire. Go and invest. Go and gather as much as you could.
Shear's ending in 3 minutes.
Because one day it's going to be appreciated. Maybe right now it's not appreciated. But it's going to come a time that you're going to appreciate all the learning you did, Moshe.
We're going to pray Malif or no?
What? If we have 10. But it's going to come a time where we're going to appreciate. So right now, and I think this is a beautiful for our times, because right now, excuse my language, but right now, Torah is so cheap. What does it mean Torah is so cheap right now? Torah is so accessible and it's so available that you just press a button and you get the whole entire Torah, every single part of it. So it's when I say cheap, I don't mean like low quality. Cheap as in sale. The Torah right now it's available. It's so available, right? Affordable, cheap, accessible, and so right now is the perfect time to gather as much Torah as possible, even if you don't understand everything, because it's going to come a time that you're going to cash in all this Torah. Every time you come to the Torah class, David, you're acquiring more.
The evil one.
Yeah, and also Alan and everyone that's here. Every time you come to a class and you're learning Torah, you are gathering gold and diamonds, and this is something you're not going to.
Something that has really helped me out these past couple of weeks. They have these bite-sized videos, 5-6 minutes videos of the Rabbi speaking, and like it's on different topics like kosher food, how to deal with the Yetzer Hara, how to deal with depression, and it's like whenever I go to YouTube or whatever, I just listen 5 minutes. That's the first thing I do, and just listening to the Rabbi just it calms me down.
It's beautiful, amazing. Okay, let's just finish up this piece over here. But another thing, Bar Kapar says, if you're in a place where there's no one to do what has to be done, you should do it. Now, this is Pirkei Avos says a similar thing. The Maharsha actually asks, why does he have to repeat it if it says in Pirkei Avos already? And he says the Pirkei Avos is talking about more for tzarchei tzibur, for communal needs. If there's nobody to do what you got to do in the community, then you step up and take charge and you do it. But here he's referring to more learning Torah. If there's nobody to teach, then you got to do it. Start teaching.
Teach yourself.
No, teach others. No. Teach others. People think that what do I know already? But the Rebbe teaches us, if you know Aleph, you know the letter Aleph, and it's the only thing you know. I know what the letter Aleph is. That's already something to teach. Teach Aleph. You know something, you got to teach what you know. Another thing Bar Kapar says, what is a small saying of the Torah that encompasses in it the entire Torah? And this is a good takeaway. Bechol, 3 words. Bechol durachecha da'eyu, which means in all of your ways, you shall know Him. You shall know God in all your ways. Which means anything that you're doing, whether it's eating, doing it for the sake of heaven, drinking, for the sake of heaven, sleeping, why am I going to sleep now? Because I need to have energy to serve Hashem. When you're praying, and not only when you're praying and learning is it for the sake of God, but even when you're doing mundane things, you should do it for the sake of heaven. Comes along Rava and says, even for an Aveira, God forbid, even when someone's transgressing, sometimes there's room for, like we mentioned before, a transgression that is done for the sake of heaven. And sometimes you have these thieves that before they would go rob, they would pray to God, please help me succeed. How's it possible?
And then afterwards they would pray, thank God I didn't get caught.
So if you believe in God, how are you going to steal? God doesn't allow stealing. So the problem is that the belief of God that he has is called makif. It surrounds him, but he didn't internalize it. But the Rabbi says it in a way that there's some times that people sinned and they did it for the sake of heaven. These days, all the commentaries say, these days absolutely forbidden to decide on your own to do that. Even one tiny little sin you're not allowed to do, even if you're doing it for the sake of God. Back then, God gave certain ideas for people to do it because he wanted. One of the things that happened in this week's Torah portion, you have the story of Lot. He's hiding in a cave, and his daughters conceived from him, and they did it. They did it for the sake of heaven. They thought that the world was destroyed, and they thought they had to rebuild the world, and they did it for the sake of heaven. And the commentators use that as an example for things which are wrong things that happen, but it's for the sake of heaven. But again, this is not something that's not a lesson for us. The lesson for us is, even in our mundane, day-to-day lives, things that we're doing in our life, we have to do it for the sake of God. Even playing and enjoyment, Yaakov. Yeah. Even watching TikTok. If you're doing it because you need to have right now a break and you want to relax because soon you're going to serve God, then it's okay. but that can't become a
way of life.
A way of life.
I mean, Lot with his daughters after Abraham split from Lot? He went up on his own?
But he split twice. He split, and then the story of Sodom happened,
Yeah,
and
don't save him.
and then after the story with his daughters, they split even more. Abraham went even further away. So he shouldn't be next to him.
Also, I'm not on TikTok.
Okay, fine. Take back what I said. No, I don't take it back. Bar Kappara says a person should teach his son a job, a craft, not a craft, profession, and it should be a profession that's nikia vikala, clean. Clean means something that's not easy to get into stealing or things or not being honest.
Corruptible.
And vikala, it should be something easy. Easy, the commentaries say, means something that you don't have to invest too much, not too risky. That should be the type of profession you should teach. And he gives an example, Mahi, and he gives machta to Talmiyusa. The example given over here is to weave, to do embroidery. That's an example of a easy and clean profession.
In those days.
These
Today
days,
they got a machine, push the button, push out 100,000.
It was very intricate back then, embroidery, no? It was very...
Okay, so we're going to stop over here. Thank you everyone for coming.
Do the women record their version?